Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're going to completely shatter everything you thought you knew about one of history's most notorious mythological figures. I mean, we are taking a seriously deep journey through ancient texts and modern science to unpack a character who is, well, far, far more fascinating than the simple bedtime stories suggest.
So, what if history's absolute worst demon was actually its greatest scientific mind? That question is our starting point today, right? Because usually the ancient Indian epic, the Ramayana, is read as a super straightforward story of good versus evil. But, that surface-level narrative, it hides an incredibly complex reality. When we really dig into the historical and cultural source material, we find that the line between a terrifying antagonist and a brilliant polymath is actually surprisingly thin.
Now, traditionally, pop culture views Ravana purely as a symbol of evil, ego, and unrighteousness. He's the ultimate villain, the 10-headed demon king of Lankapura who abducted Sita. But what's truly fascinating here is what that surface-level definition entirely leaves out. We all know pop culture has a really bad habit of flattening incredibly deep characters into simple caricatures, right? If we just stop our research at that pop cultural level, we completely miss the profound depths of a mind that the original texts actually describe in astonishing detail.
By contrasting the myth with his actual, documented pedigree, a totally different picture starts to emerge. Ravana wasn't just some mindless monster. He was the grandson of sage Pulastya, making him a Brahmin by lineage. And even more impressively, he was a recognized master of all 64 classical arts. I mean, just think about the sheer brain power required for that. We aren't just talking about sword fighting here, we're talking about absolute mastery over architecture, metallurgy, mathematics, perfumery, and even complex gymnastics. He was basically a Renaissance man, thousands of years before the Renaissance even existed. So here we see this brilliant, highly educated mind perfectly coexisting with a tragic eventual downfall.
Section 1. The Scholar Behind the Demon.
Let's actually look at these accomplishments because they are honestly staggering. While most ancient kings were busy just swinging swords and conquering territory, Ravana was essentially acting as a chief medical officer and an astrophysicist all rolled into one. He authored the Ravana Samhita, which is an Ayurvedic text detailing complex medical diagnoses and herbal healing that, believe it or not, is still actively studied by practitioners today. On top of that, he was a renowned expert in Vedic astrology, mapping cosmic forces to human destiny, and a true maestro of the Veena. And if you know anything about the Veena, it is an incredibly complex and difficult stringed instrument to master. And, this wild duality of his character is beautifully illustrated by his intense devotion to Lord Shiva. He possessed such unwavering devotion that he underwent colossal penance. The ancient texts tell this epic story of him literally lifting Mount Kailash. Out of that intense passion, physical exertion, and spiritual fury, he composed the famous Shiva Tandav Stotram. The crazy part? The reason this matters today is that modern musicians and mathematicians still marvel at this specific hymn. Its complex meter, rhythmic structure, and poetic perfection are so profound that it's still revered and sung globally right now.
Moving on to Section 2, Symbolism of the 10 Heads.
So let's deconstruct those famous 10 heads. Because, on one hand, they symbolize his absolute, unmatched mastery of the most complex spiritual and scientific texts of his era. They represent his deep, internalized knowledge of the 6 Shastras, the foundational scriptures dictating everything from grammar and logic to philosophy and law, along with the 4 Vedas. Now, to put that into perspective, it typically takes a scholar an entire lifetime of rigorous discipline to master just one of these texts. Ravana? He mastered all 10. He was, quite literally, a walking encyclopedia of ancient wisdom. But here is the crucial part. Those heads also represent the 10 human emotions. Everything from lust, anger, and delusion to intellect, will, and ego. And this highlights something incredibly relatable to our modern human experience, the severe duality of human nature. Having 10 heads meant experiencing every single human emotion and desire at a magnitude 10 times greater than a normal person. I mean, just imagine how exhausting and volatile that must have been. He possessed this unparalleled intellect, but was constantly derailed by hyper-intensified ego and anger. Actually, King Mahabali offered him the ultimate advice here. He said to shun the other 9 emotional heads and lead strictly with his intellect, or buddhi. But Ravana just straight up refused. He argued that experiencing all facets, even the highly destructive ones, was what made him a complete man. And really, this is the absolute core of his tragic narrative arc. His superpower, feeling and knowing everything at 10 times the normal magnitude, was also his ultimate kryptonite.
His fatal flaw wasn't a lack of knowledge, it was his complete failure to regulate his emotions. He chose to let his ego dictate his actions, and well, that ultimately reduced his golden kingdom to ashes.
All right, let's pivot to Section 3, Ravana's ancient flying chariot.
Okay, we have to talk about the Vimana, specifically Ravana's Pushpaka Vimana. This was an aerial vehicle he actually won from his stepbrother Kuber, adding a little ancient family drama to the mix, right? But the text described this vehicle as a miraculous, modular masterpiece. It was constructed from highly significant parts and technologies collected from all over the world. When you read about it, it sounds less like a magical wooden chariot and a lot more like how we construct the International Space Station today, bringing together different global modules into one highly advanced, cohesive craft.
Just think about that for a second before we dig into this next quote, which is translated directly from the Yuddha Kanda of the Ramayana. It says, "The Pushpaka Vimana moves about by thoughts of concentrated mind." Wait, what? Thousands of years before we even had the basic concept of electricity, they were describing thought-controlled aviation. The implications of that are absolutely mind-blowing. This ancient text is essentially describing the ultimate smart vehicle, deeply interconnected with the consciousness of its pilot. Bridging these two concepts is just fascinating to me. We're moving from the deep, ancient imagination carved right into the stone of the Ellora caves over to modern, futuristic aerospace engineering concepts. Seeing them side by side naturally begs the question, is this just wild, ancient imagination, or are we looking at a glimpse into a forgotten technological past? Like, how did they even conceptualize aerospace engineering thousands of years ago?
Which brings us right to Section 4, Ancient Myths, Modern Tech.
Could ancient mythology actually be a blueprint for modern space science? Look, we aren't claiming Ravana flew a literal spaceship here. But in this explainer, we really have to ask why these ancient descriptions map so incredibly perfectly to modern research and our current technological goals. The parallels are they're almost too specific to ignore.
Believe it or not, actual modern aerospace researchers are taking these texts very seriously. Take a look at this article from the Acceleron Aerospace Journal. They are literally treating the mythological features of the Pushpaka Vimana as a visionary framework. They are comparing an ancient epic to real, developing aerospace technologies. It really goes to show that sometimes mythology acts as the ultimate sci-fi mood board for today's scientists.
Let's dive a bit deeper into the specific parallels drawn by these researchers. The text says the Vimana move by thought, right? Well, today we have companies like Neuralink actively developing brain-computer interfaces, where you think a command and the computer executes it. The ancient text says the chariot could appear and disappear at will. Fast forward to today, and researchers at institutions like IIT Delhi are developing metamaterials that bend light to create actual invisibility cloaks for stealth tech. The text mentions silent flight, which maps perfectly to our modern pursuit of quantum propulsion and advanced noise reduction. It's like the Ramayana eerily predicted today's absolute bleeding-edge scientific frontiers.
Finally, let's zoom out a bit for Section 5, Legacy Beyond Good and Evil.
This timeline shows a remarkable journey of ideas spanning thousands of years. We see how these profound concepts traveled from ancient Indian Vedic texts when they were translated by early scholars. They eventually made their way across the ocean and deeply influenced 19th century American transcendentalist thinkers. Henry David Thoreau was famously known to read the Gita at Walden Pond. And from those philosophical roots, these ideas eventually exploded onto the silver screen to fundamentally shape modern American pop culture.
So, the next time you watch Neo dodge a bullet in the Matrix, or see a Jedi use the Force, remember, you're actually watching echoes of ancient Vedic philosophy. The Matrix perfectly illustrates the concept of Maya, or the grand illusion of reality. Star Wars strongly mirrors the Ramayana's narrative structure, with the Force acting as Shakti, or cosmic energy. Even the massive blockbuster Avatar takes its name straight from the Sanskrit word for descent and heavily focuses on the deeply Hindu concept of an interconnected web of life.
I want to leave you all with this final provocative thought. If an ancient epic can predict brain-computer interfaces and heavily shape modern Hollywood blockbusters, what other futuristic secrets are hiding in the myths of our past? History isn't just a dusty record of what happened long ago. Sometimes, if we look closely enough at the myths, if we deconstruct multifaceted characters like Ravana, it might just be a window straight into our future.